Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Jarrell Miller, he's meant to be fighting on January the 18th, opponent TBA. And on the face of it, that's a terrible look. No opponent about 10 days out from a scheduled fight, and this guy supposedly a top 10 contender in the heavyweight division. You look at that and go, well, it's not really a good look. But Dillian Whyte, some comments that he's made to IFL TV, which on screen here, reported by Boxing Scene, summarised here, it sort of puts that position with Jarrell Miller and no opponent into some perspective for me, because I'm beginning to wonder if Jarrell Miller, and it's not so much that he is potentially next for Anthony Joshua, but I'm wondering, is he being used as a pawn with the negotiations between Whyte and Joshua? Because Whyte, he will want his cut of the fight. And some of this here I'll go through and then get to some thoughts, because it may not be plain sailing, and Jarrell Miller, he might be the backup if everything goes pear-shaped, but he could be a bit of a pawn here in the negotiations, just in case they do. But also, it's a bit of leverage over Dillian Whyte in the Dillian Whyte camp. So Whyte says, I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. I expected him and his team to have at least contacted me. I'm not meeting Eddie until another 2 weeks. That's not enough time to prepare for a fight like that. You need to know what's going on so you can start preparing from now. I need to know what I'm doing now. Why at the end of the month? I meant to be meeting him, I think the 14th or 15th. And then it says Boxing Scene revealed a few weeks ago that potentially Jarrell Miller could face Anthony Joshua, but at a later date, Madison Square Garden, yada yada yada. And Whyte also weighs in on that. Rumour has it that Joshua's going to fight Miller in Madison Square Garden. So let's see. It's a small world, and a lot of things you hear in boxing, there's usually a massive amount of truth to it. Dillian Whyte's statements, that was to IFL TV, as subsequently re-reported on BoxingScene.com. That's what you can see here on screen. Just got me wondering about this no opponent thing for Jarrell Miller. And let's face it, that was a stay busy date anyway, so it was never going to be anyone good. And if they really wanted Jarrell Miller in with a tough contender for January the 18th, they would have announced it shortly after his November 17th win over Bogdan Dino, and that was a 4-rounder. Didn't really take much punishment or damage in that. He said he wanted to stay busy, stay active, and he's recently been in the United Kingdom on a promotional tour of sorts, trying to build his profile, because they're trying to warm up the UK market, the casual market, up to the prospect of a Jarrell Miller and Anthony Joshua fight, because that is on the cards in the next year or so. We don't know when, but potentially it could be next. And certainly in recent weeks, there's been a lot of talk of that. Dillian Whyte has referred to that, but that sort of subsequently died down considerably after Anthony Joshua got up to the ring apron and said, Dillian Whyte, look, if Deontay Wilder isn't next, you're next. So that kind of extinguished, Jarrell Miller from the equation, at least for the moment. But now it's, with Whyte's comments, it just sort of bubbled back up. But it got me wondering about the whole negotiation of this, because there's been no progress with Deontay Wilder, Eddie Hearn, Barry Hearn. They've been very clear on that. They've said that there hasn't been much doing there. Dillian Whyte, he's revealed recently on Soccer AM that they've been talking about a potential fight with Joshua and trying to work that out in terms of negotiation for months. So it's not like it's just starting from scratch. They have been talking about this, but Dillian Whyte is sort of saying he would have expected, after his win over Derek Chisora on December the 22nd, and especially in light of Anthony Joshua's comments about, Whyte being the backup option to Deontay Wilder, he would have expected the wheels to be turning much quicker, and he's not scheduled to meet with Eddie Hearn until the 14th or 15th of January. And then you throw in this whole thing, Jarrell Miller, upcoming fight, no opponent, and with the speculation of a Miller option being there, it just gets me thinking, well, is this a negotiating tactic? Because if Whyte and his team, whoever's negotiating on his behalf, if they ask for too much, there is obviously this other option here of Jarrell Miller. And I'm sure Eddie Hearn doesn't want to be effectively negotiating just with one guy, because if there's more options, then there's some leverage, and they can use that against Dillian Whyte and his camp and say, look, here's the deal. This is what Anthony Joshua is prepared to give you, a flat fee or a smaller percentage or whatever it ends up being. Take it or leave it, or we're going to go elsewhere. And you'd have to imagine if they did decide to abandon Wembley, the date of April the 13th, which is apparently the only date they could get in all of 2019, it's a hell of a move. I can't really see them abandoning it. I think some of this could fall into the territory of hardball negotiations, not wanting to just, have Whyte sort of demanding whatever he wants. Anthony Joshua will want some control in the negotiations and want to have the lion's share of the pie if it is a Dillian Whyte fight. And in those circumstances, you kind of go, well, what is fair? What does Whyte bring to the table? He's obviously got a growing following, but he doesn't have a belt. It's not a unification. It's a voluntary challenge. There is some history there, a rivalry, but it's not like in terms of this fight, if that goes ahead. It's not like that was the fight that was on everyone's lips. It was kind of a third option, a fourth option for some people. Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, those are the fights that they wanted to see Anthony Joshua in with. So from an interest standpoint from fans, it's maybe not as high up there as it could have been, or they probably would have wanted it to be. Because if everyone wanted to see Dillian Whyte fight Anthony Joshua, and that was the fight everyone was begging for, it would have been made. But now we're in the situation where it's likely to be Whyte. And obviously you've got Miller here off to the side. Well, you can sort of play that off against Dillian Whyte and the negotiating and all that sort of thing. And if he plays too much hardball, then obviously that could work against him. So there will be some pressure on, no doubt, in the negotiating room for Dillian Whyte to take, a smaller offer than he probably will be willing to take. He's probably hearing that Deontay Wilder's had a percentage offer, that sort of stuff and whatnot. He will probably want a percentage offer himself, where you can guarantee that Anthony Joshua's team will want to give Dillian Whyte a flat fee. We've seen in recent negotiations, Anthony Joshua plays hardball in the negotiations. He's not going to want to give up more than he has to. But it'll be interesting to see what happens now with Jarrell Miller, because he's obviously on social media, and let's just have a look on screen here. A little promo piece here. I'm not going to play because I'll get copyrighted for the music, but I'm putting somebody's lights out that it's in respect of January the 18th. This is 4 days ago. Still no word on an opponent. But you have to wonder, what's happening here? And if he got pulled from that card, it might even be a stronger signal that he could be next for Anthony Joshua, because if you don't want to put him into unnecessary risk of getting injured or something like that, if he is actually going to fight Joshua, because that could be a recipe for disaster. So then there may be no Whyte fight, or there could be no Miller fight. And then you're kind of looking like, well, okay, you have to go back to square one and start negotiating again. And that would put Whyte in a stronger position the second time around, especially if there is no one else to compete against in terms of negotiations. But just a few thoughts on this whole situation and Whyte's comments. It really got me thinking about what's really going on behind the scenes, and potentially he's not negotiating against himself here. He could have Miller to contend with. But I would imagine if they pull out of Wembley, the penalty, it would be steep. So they'd really have to want to go to New York, and it would have to make commercial sense for them to pull out, take a hit. And would Eddie Hearn be able to fill Wembley in April with another card? I wouldn't have thought he's got the actual superstar besides Joshua to do that, especially now that Amir Khan is going to fight Terence Crawford. That kind of, was potentially a backup option. It's kind of the rug's been pulled out from Hearn on that one. I'm not sure if they could fill Wembley with anything else that they've got in their stable at the moment. Yeah, what do you make of it all? Is Jarrell Miller, is the lack of an opponent, do you think that's deliberate, or do you just think they haven't been able to find anyone? Do you think he's being used as a pawn here to try and limit Dillian Whyte in negotiations? Is hardball tactics underway here? I'd imagine so. What about you? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out. If you want even more boxing content, come and join me on Patreon. Every week on a Sunday, I drop a new video on something topical or thought-provoking from the heavyweight division, ranging from rankings, the business of boxing, the false economy of deluded fanboys, the twists and turns in the division, to assessments of fighters and their statements. I hope to see you there, and for more information go to patreon.com/boxing squared. The address is on screen now.